Before we dive into today's story, it is essential to reflect on the foundations of a healthy family. We believe that every home should be a place of mutual respect and integrity. We firmly repudiate any form of emotional manipulation, age-related prejudice, or the exploitation of family ties for personal gain. No one should be treated as inferior because of their age or their kindness. If you value stories that honor truth and family dignity, please subscribe to our channel, turn on notifications, and leave your like. Your support helps us tell stories that matter. Now, let's enter the world of Martha. My name is Martha, and I have always believed that silence is a sign of elegance. For 60 years, I built a life based on discretion, hard work, and the silent preservation of my family's legacy. When my son, Julian, brought Chloe home for the first time, I wanted to be the mother-in-law I never had. I wanted to open the doors of our ancestral home with a smile and a warm heart. I remember that afternoon clearly. The scent of jasmine from the garden was heavy in the air, and the silver tea set the one passed down through for generations was polished to a mirror shine. Chloe walked in with a confidence that felt more like a challenge than a greeting. She was beautiful, yes, but her eyes didn't look at the history on the walls. They looked at the price tags she imagined were attached to everything. I told myself I was being judgmental. I told myself that every generation has its own way of being bold. Julian was head over heels in love, and as a mother, his happiness was my priority. In those early days, everything seemed perfect on the surface. We had Sunday brunches, where Chloe would talk about her career in high-end real estate, her voice always a pitch too loud for our quiet dining room. I would nod, offer her more tea, and ignore the way she would subtly criticize the old-fashioned decor of the house my late husband and I had spent decades perfecting. I didn't see the boldness as a threat back then. I saw it as the fire of youth. I didn't realize that the fire she brought wasn't meant to warm our home, but to burn it down so she could build her own throne upon the ashes. The beginning was marked by my own naivety. I allowed her to take the lead in family gatherings, thinking I was being gracious. I let her reorganize the pantry and change the flower arrangements, telling myself it was a small price to pay for my son's smile. I remember one evening, Julian was late from the office, and Chloe and I sat on the porch. She looked at me, not with affection, but with a cold, calculating gaze, and said, "Martha, you've worked so hard for so long. Don't you think it's time you just stepped aside? Let the new blood handle the estate." I laughed it off, thinking it was a joke. I didn't see the predator hiding behind the daughter-in-law's smile. I didn't know that she had already started looking for the keys to my life, convinced that I was too old and too soft to stop her. The first crack in the porcelain appeared during my 60th birthday dinner. I had planned a small, intimate gathering with old friends, people who knew the history behind every painting and every scar on the floorboards. Chloe, however, took it upon herself to upgrade my celebration without asking. She hired a trendy catering service that replaced my traditional recipes with cold, unrecognizable appetizers. She invited people I had never met, her business associates, influencers, and strangers who spent the night taking selfies against my fireplace, as if it were a studio backdrop. I stood in the corner of my own living room, feeling like an uninvited guest. I remember watching her hold court in the center of the room, wearing a dress that cost more than a year of Julian's college tuition, laughing loudly while spilling red wine near my antique Persian rug. When I gently suggested that we move the drinks to the terrace, she didn't apologize. She tilted her head, looked me up and down, and said loud enough for everyone to hear, "Oh, Martha, don't be such a museum curator. Houses are meant to be lived in, not preserved in amber. Relax, I'll pay for the cleaning if your precious rug gets a little character." The room went silent for a heartbeat. My friends looked at me, waiting for the fire to flash in my eyes. But I simply smiled, adjusted my pearls, and walked away. That night, after the last stranger had left, and the house smelled of expensive perfume and cheap ego, I found Chloe in my study. She was sitting in Julian's father's chair, the one no one sits in out of respect. She was flipping through my private ledger, the one where I keep the records of the family trust and the estates overhead. She didn't even look guilty when I walked in. She just tapped the page with her manicured fingernail and said, "You know, Martha, this estate is bleeding money and maintenance. If we subdivided the East Garden and built luxury townhomes, Julian wouldn't have to work another day in his life. You're sitting on a gold mine, and you're treating it like a vegetable patch." I realized then that her boldness wasn't just a personality trait, it was an agenda. She wasn't just Julian's wife. She was a silent partner in a takeover I hadn't signed up for. And she truly believed that my politeness was a sign that I was already defeated. The weeks that followed were a masterclass in psychological warfare. Chloe didn't attack me directly anymore. She began to help me out of my own life. It started with the staff. Maria, who had been our housekeeper for 20 years, came to me in tears one morning because Chloe had reprimanded her for using my preferred cleaning products, calling them toxic relics of the past. When I tried to intervene, Chloe cornered me in the kitchen. "Martha, you're just too kind for your own good," she said, her voice dripping with artificial sweetness. "I'm just professionalizing the household. You shouldn't have to worry about these trivial things at your age." But the real knife went into my heart through Julian. My son, who used to spend Sunday mornings with me talking about the estate and our family history, was becoming a stranger. Chloe had convinced him that I was suffering from the early stages of exhaustion and that the house was a burden I was too proud to put down. I would overhear them in the hallway, her hushed tones filled with feigned concern. "Honey, your mother is struggling. Did you see how she misplaced her glasses yesterday? Maybe it's time we take over the finances so she can finally rest." Julian, blinded by love and her constant flattery, began to look at me with pity instead of respect. One evening, the distance became an abyss. We were having dinner meal Chloe had ordered from a minimalist restaurant, served on new plates she bought without telling me, while my grandmother's china sat ignored in the cupboard. Julian cleared his throat, looking uncomfortable. Mom, he started, glancing at Chloe for support. Chloe, and I think it would be best if we moved into the master wing. It's more practical, since we'll be the ones hosting from now on. We've already started looking at some lovely assisted living suites for you. Just for the winter, so you don't have to deal with the stairs. The silence that followed was freezing. I looked at my son and saw Chloe's reflection in his eyes. She sat there, sipping her wine, a smug smile playing on her lips. She didn't just want the house. She wanted to erase me while I was still breathing. She thought she had one. She thought I was the frail old woman they were painting me to be. She had no idea that I wasn't fading away, I was observing. And what I saw was a daughter-in-law who had finally crossed a line from which there is no return. Entendido, dieter. Vamos manter o foco no bloco tu. Mas agora elevando atensao. Martha no pod macer apenas uma espectadora passiva. Ela comeca senir o venino di Chloe afetando a estrutura da casa y el de das pesos al su redor. Vamos mostrar como a audacia di Chloe se transforma en una tentativa de interdico emotional. Continuaco du bloco tu as pequeñas distancias. The small distances, part to English version, the gaslighting became a daily routine. Chloe started hiding my keys, only to find them later in obvious places, glancing at Julian with that look of tragic concern. Oh, Martha, again. Maybe Julian is right about the doctor. I said nothing. I let her play her game. But then, she crossed a line that involved more than just my dignity. She began to meddle with the family's charitable trust, a foundation my family had managed for 60 years to support the local orphanage. I walked into the study one morning to find her shredding documents. "What are you doing, Chloe?" I asked, my voice as cold as a winter morning. She didn't even flinch. She kept feeding the paper into the machine. "I'm cutting the dead weight, Martha. We're reallocating these funds into a venture capital firm Julian and I are starting. It's for our future. The orphanage can find other donors." When I told her that money wasn't hers to touch, she stood up, walked over to me, and leaned in close. She smelled of expensive mint and malice. Technically, Julian is the primary heir. And as his wife, I am his proxy. You're just a signature on a fading piece of history. Don't make this harder than it needs to be. Go take your nap, Martha. The adults are talking now. That was the moment the pity in my heart for her ignorance turned into a calculated fire. She thought my silence was senility. She thought my lack of reaction was fear. She didn't realize that I was documenting every cent she moved, every document she destroyed, and every lie she told Julian. I watched her host strategy meetings in my ballroom, watching her treat my home like a corporate office. I saw her flirt with Julian's business rivals to secure deals. I realized Chloe wasn't just bold, she was reckless. She was so convinced of her own brilliance and my weakness that she stopped being careful. She didn't know that I had installed security cameras in the study years ago after Julian's father passed. She didn't know that I was recording every single one of her professionalizations. She was so busy building her throne that she didn't notice the ground beneath it was already starting to crumble. Entendido, dieter. No bloco 3. A mascara di executiva di successo, da Chloe comica care. Martha, com sua pacienza di quam con his avida, discover qua dacia da norai. Na verdade, escudo para esconder rastro de dívidas e frauds. E o momento da investigaco silenciosa. Block 3, the unraveling. Bloco 3, O Desenroller English version. They say that those who scream the loudest usually have the most to hide. Chloe's constant talk about venture capital and modernizing the estate began to sound like a desperate song to my ears. I decided it was time to stop being a spectator and start being the guardian I was raised to be. One afternoon, while Chloe was at one of her high-profile luncheons, I took a drive to her former office in the city. I didn't go in as a mother-in-law. I went in as Martha Vance, a woman whose family name still carried weight in the financial district. What I found was chilling. Chloe hadn't left her last firm to pursue bigger dreams. She had been quietly asked to leave after a series of accounting irregularities involving client escrow accounts. She was a ghost in the professional world, living on credit and borrowed time. The luxury car she drove, leased in Julian's name, without him realizing the full terms. The investors she brought to our home, they weren't partners, they were creditors. She was stalling with promises of my family's land. But the final blow came when I checked the mail, not the one delivered to the front door, but the private box Julian's father had kept for legal documents. I found a foreclosure notice on a property she had convinced Julian to co-sign for a month after the wedding. She was using my son's credit to bridge a gap in a life that was a complete lie. She wasn't trying to build a future for Julian. She was using him as a human shield against her own bankruptcy. As I sat in the dim light of the study, looking at the evidence, I felt a strange sense of calm. The boldness I had feared wasn't strength. It was the frantic clawing of someone drowning. She thought she was the hunter, but she had walked right into the den of a woman who had nothing left to lose but the truth. I waited for them in the dining room that night. The table was set with the old china, the pieces Chloe hated. I sat at the head of the table, composed and silent. When they walked in, laughing, Chloe stopped mid-sentence. She saw the folders in front of me. She saw the look in my eyes. Julian looked confused, still trying to play the mediator. Mom, what's all this? I thought we were having a relaxed evening. I didn't look at him. I looked directly at Chloe. I watched her eyes dart to the folders, her face paling under her expensive foundation. A relaxed evening is for people with clear consciences, Julian, I said softly. I opened the first folder and slid a document toward her. Tell me, Chloe, does the venture capital firm know about the 60-day default on the city property? Or is that the character you were hoping to add to our family name? Chloe tried to laugh it off, but her voice was an octave too high. Martha, you're being paranoid. These are just growing pains of a new business. I simply pulled out the second folder, the one with the surveillance stills of her meeting with the creditors in my own house. The room became so quiet, you could hear the clock ticking in the hallway. Chloe's reaction was instantaneous. The refined executive vanished, replaced by a cornered animal. She didn't cry, she snarled. "You've been spying on me? In your own home?" She shouted, turning to Julian with a look of practiced betrayal. "Julian, do you see this? Your mother has lost her mind. She's been tracking my movements, digging into my past like some obsessed private eye. This is exactly why I said she needs help. She's trying to destroy us because she can't stand that I'm the one you listen to now." Julian looked back and forth between us, his face a mask of agony. "Mom, please. This is too much. Investigating her? Is this true?" I didn't move. I didn't raise my voice. I simply placed the third folder on the table, the bank statements, showing the unauthorized transfers from the family trust to an offshore account in Chloe's maiden name. "Julian," I said, my voice steady as stone, "I didn't investigate a daughter-in-law. I investigated a fraud who was using my son as a bank account. Look at the dates. Look at the signatures. She didn't just modernize our life, Julian. She was planning to leave you with the debt while she walked away with the inheritance. The silence that followed was suffocating. Chloe tried to grab the folder, but I placed my hand firmly over it. She looked at me, and for the first time, the boldness was gone, replaced by a pure, unfiltered hatred. "You think you've won?" she hissed, leaning over the table. "Julian loves me. He'll believe whatever I tell him. I'll tell the doctors you're delusional. I'll make sure you spend your retirement in a padded room." She turned to Julian, her voice shifting into a pathetic whimper. "Julian, honey, she's lying. She forged those. She hates me because I'm young, because I'm everything she's not. Don't let her do this to us." It was a desperate, ugly display, and as I watched her, I realized that her greatest mistake wasn't the theft, it was underestimating the strength of the bond she had tried so hard to break. Julian stood there, his hands trembling as he gripped the edge of the mahogany table. He looked at the bank statements, then at Chloe, who was still trying to maintain her act of the victimized wife. For a second, I saw his resolve waver. Chloe's manipulation was a powerful poison. She moved toward him, trying to place her hand on his chest. "Julian, look at me," she whispered, her voice a mix of honey and venom. "We're a team. Your mother is just trying to control you again. She's jealous of our future." But then, I did something Chloe didn't expect. I didn't argue. I simply turned on the monitor in the corner of the dining room. On the screen, the security footage from the study began to play. It wasn't just a silent movie. The audio was crystal clear. There was Chloe, laughing with her primary creditor, telling him, "Don't worry about the Vance legacy. Once I have Julian sign the power of attorney, I'll liquidate the estate, and we'll be out of the country before the old woman even realizes she's homeless." The sound of her own voice, so cold and calculating, echoing in the room, was the final blow. Chloe froze. The bold daughter-in-law looked like a ghost. Julian stepped back from her as if her touch burned him. The silence that followed was broken only by the sound of Julian's heart breaking. He looked at me, his eyes filled with a devastating clarity. "Mom," he choked out. "I'm so sorry." He turned to Chloe, and for the first time, he saw her for what she was, a predator in a designer dress. "Get out," he said, his voice low but vibrating with rage. "Julian, wait," she started, but he didn't let her finish. "The locks have already been changed on the guest wing," I added calmly, sliding a pre-written divorce settlement and an eviction notice across the table. "And the police are waiting at the end of the driveway to discuss those accounting irregularities. You wanted the Vance estate, Chloe. Now you're going to get the full Vance experience. Our lawyers. Chloe's facade didn't just crack. It shattered into 1,000 jagged pieces." Seeing the police lights flickering through the tall windows of the dining room, she stopped pretending to be the victim. Her face contorted, her eyes narrow and filled with a venomous light. "You think you're so superior, Martha?" She spat, her voice now a jagged edge. "You're just a relic in a dusty museum. I would have saved this family from your boring, ancient traditions. Julian is a weakling who needed me to lead him, and you're just a woman waiting for the grave." She grabbed a crystal glass from the table and threw it against the fireplace, the sound of shattering glass echoing like a gunshot. Julian flinched, but I didn't move an inch. I simply stood up, my posture straighter than it had been in years. "A relic, perhaps," I said, my voice cutting through her rage like a diamond through glass. "But a relic with the power to erase you. You came into this house thinking you were a predator, Chloe. But you forgot that I built this jungle. Every cent you stole, every document you forged, and every lie you told has been logged, notarized, and handed to the authorities. You aren't leaving with Julian's dignity or my money. You're leaving with a criminal record." Julian finally stepped forward, placing himself between me and the woman he no longer recognized. He didn't scream. His silence was more devastating. He handed her the small designer suitcase she had left in the hallway earlier. I had Maria pack it for her hours ago. "Your things are in the car," Julian said, his voice hollow but firm. "The lawyers will handle the rest. Don't ever step foot on Vance property again." As the officers entered the room to escort her out, Chloe looked back at me one last time, her boldness now replaced by a frantic, wide-eyed terror. She realized then that she hadn't been playing a game with a frail old woman. She had been playing with a queen who knew exactly how to protect her kingdom. The aftermath of Chloe's departure was a season of long silences and deep reflections. The legal process was swift and merciless. Because of the mountain of evidence, I had gathered the offshore transfers, the forged signatures on the trust documents, and the recorded attempts at extortion. The court showed no leniency. Chloe's boldness didn't save her in front of a judge. She was sentenced to 5 years in a minimum security facility for corporate fraud and grand larceny. The luxury car, the designer clothes, and the fake life she built on credit were all liquidated to repay the charitable trust. She went from wanting to rule a mansion to sharing a cell, her name now a cautionary tale in the very circles she once tried to dominate. But the real work of restoration happened within the walls of our home. Julian spent weeks in a state of quiet shock, haunted by the realization of how close he had come to losing everything. One evening, as the sun was setting behind the jasmine bushes, he came to me in the study. He didn't say a word at first. He just sat in his father's chair this time with permission and put his head in his hands. "I almost destroyed us, Mom," he whispered. I walked over and placed my hand on his shoulder. "No, Julian," I said gently. "You were blinded by someone who knew exactly how to use your goodness as a weapon. The house is still standing. The legacy is still yours. We don't fix a family by dwelling on the fire. We fix it by building something stronger from the embers." We spent the following months cleaning the house not just from the dirt, but from Chloe's influence. We brought back the old china, restored the garden she wanted to pave over, and renewed our commitment to the orphanage she tried to defund. Julian took over the management of the estate, but this time he did it with me by his side, learning that true leadership isn't about modernizing at any cost, but about protecting what is sacred. I realized that my own boldness wasn't in the fight, but in the survival. I am Martha Vance, and I have learned that while youth may have the fire, age has the light. And in the light of truth, predators like Chloe can never find a place to hide. A year has passed since the night the police cars lined our driveway. Silence has returned to the Vance estate, but it's no longer the heavy, suffocating silence of a house under siege. It's the peaceful quiet of a home that has been cleansed. I often sit in the garden, the one Chloe called a vegetable patch, and watch the children from the orphanage play among the jasmine. The funds she tried to steal are now building a new wing for their school. Justice, I've learned, is the best fertilizer for a legacy. Julian is a different man now. The shadows of guilt have been replaced by a quiet, steady strength. He doesn't look for shortcuts anymore, and he certainly doesn't mistake arrogance for ambition. Sometimes we talk about that time, and he asks me how I stayed so calm while our world was being dismantled from the inside. I tell him the truth. When you know the value of your foundation, you don't panic when someone tries to paint over the walls. Chloe thought her youth was her greatest weapon, but she didn't realize that my age was my greatest shield. She was bold, but I was enduring. I never imagined my own daughter-in-law could be so calculating, but in a strange way, I am grateful for the storm she brought. It forced us to see the cracks we had ignored and to reinforce the bonds that truly matter. I am Martha Vance, and as I look at the horizon, I know that my story isn't about the woman who tried to take my place. It's about the woman who was strong enough to keep it. In this house, we don't just preserve the past, we protect the future. And that is a boldness she could never understand. A few months ago, a letter arrived at the estate. It was from the facility where Chloe is serving her time. She didn't write to apologize. She wrote to ask for money, still clinging to the delusion that she could manipulate me. I didn't reply. Instead, I sent her a photo of the new library we opened at the orphanage, dedicated to the family she tried to destroy. I wanted her to see that while she sits in a gray cell. The world is becoming more colorful without her greed. The boldness she was so proud of has left her with nothing but a prisoner number. Meanwhile, Julian and I have started a foundation to help other families protect their assets from predatory partners. I realized that my mission wasn't just to save my house, but to teach others how to spot the wolves in designer clothing. Today, as I sit on my porch, I don't look back with anger. I look forward with the peace of a woman who knows her worth. Chloe had no idea what was coming because she was looking at my wrinkles, not my spirit. And in the end, it was the old woman she mocked who taught her the most expensive lesson of her life. You can buy a dress, you can buy a car, but you can never, ever buy a Vance.